الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and welcome to Islamic OASIS Live. Dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara waquduha an-nasu wal hijara. And this ayah, subhanallah, one of the ayat that discusses the responsibility of a family, and especially the role of the father, and the role of the father in protecting his family, whether it's his wife, his children, and the family in general. And of course, being in the West, all kinds of dynamics are playing out in many different sectors of society. You have people who are trying to change the whole family, how the family structure works. You have now 3, 4, Allahu Alam, how many different types of family structures are being set up. Families are being destroyed. Families are being reconstructed. Definitions are being given to what families are, what a father is, what a male is, what a man is, what a woman is. And this is confusion upon confusion. And this is why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُخْرِجُونَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes people, takes them out of zulumat, darknesses, not just darkness, but all types of darknesses, and He brings them to nur, which is Quran and Sunnah and guidance from Allah Azza wa Jal, هُدًى لِلنَّاسِ. It is guidance for mankind. So to discuss this issue further, especially in this age where there is so much confusion, to get a perspective of what a role of especially the father is. And so we brought back Dr. Abdul Wahid. Dr. Abdul Wahid has been on our show many times, discussing many different topics across the spectrum from the Muslim world, politics, and today he's going to talk about family. He's written a book, inshallah. I'm not sure if it's published yet, but it's a book. It's called Muslim Dad's Survival Guide, My 6 Secret Summary. And inshallah, we're going to discuss that book. So let's tune in and let's bring in Dr. Abdul Wahid. Welcome to Islamic Oasis. Welcome back.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for having me back.
Oh, you're always welcome, Sheikh, anytime. So, Sheikh, let's start with this. Why are we so confused that we have to actually put together books like this in today's modern age of technology and all kinds of Allahu Alam, where we actually have to write survival guides for dads?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So first of all, just a slight correction. This is not a book I've written. Actually, it started as a series I did on YouTube about 5-6 years back. So there's like a 15-part series on YouTube, which I titled A Muslim Dad's or a Muslim Father's Survival Guide.
And this 51 slides, mashallah.
Yeah, this presentation that I prepared, which I'm sharing with you today, and I think I can share it now. Actually, we tried it earlier, but I think it will work. But this presentation, which I'm sharing with you today, is like a summary, an
Mm,
intro, a taster, which I just titled "My Six Secrets," because that was a catchy title, I thought. Which is just an introduction to my thoughts on parenting. And Sheikh Shirazi, one of the things I'll say is you guys in the States, us guys in the UK, we are, we have a generation gap.
mm,
Okay. They have this expression, don't they? It takes a village to raise a child. And naturally, back home in our homelands, you will not just have a mother and a father raising a child. You have older siblings, you have uncles, aunts, grandparents, cousins. There's a lot of people looking out for the well being of children in that kind of
mm.
environment.
Yeah,
And
subhanallah. It's very
when
true.
our parents and our grandparents and that generation, or even our own generation, people migrate away from that environment, actually, you end up having to start from scratch again. And if I add to that, even back in our Islamic society, in our Muslim countries, these are not really Islamic societies, are they? These are Muslim countries where the remnants of Islamic civilization still exist in some of the values and some of the traditions. But let's face it, we lived through an era of decline
Mm,
where at best, people are doing this just by habit. They're not doing it by thought, by consciousness. It's not like we have really well thought through Islamic parenting programs or education curricula, which are designed by uh, policy thinkers and implemented at a governmental level as they should be. Okay, it's been over a century since we had Khilafah. It's been, and even that was a declined era. So uh, there is a need for us as individuals, as communities, to think about this, just as there is a need for us to have Islamic civilization realized again and a proper Islamic education system to actually take care of the needs of this ummah. My presentation is actually a modest one. It has a modest goal. It's talking to parents who have to deal with the here, the now, the challenges we have in the context of this absence of an Islamic civilization, and actually, it should make them realize that the best you can do is really not ideal. All right. There is, even we do our best, there is a big gap. As you will see as I go through what I want to say, the very best you can do, you will still find big challenges, big problems. And I've been talking to some family members who are in Pakistan, and honestly, Sheikh, the challenges are unusually similar, and that shouldn't surprise us. In Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, many other places in the Muslim world, they import Western curricula.
mm,
Uh, hey, your former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, under Donald Trump, even boasted when he visited Saudi that they were going to write the curriculum for them, okay, because they didn't like some of the stuff that was going on in the curriculum there. So we have to realize there are some serious challenges the world over. uh, there is a need for the Islamic civilization to be realized and a political authority to implement decent education policies. My lecture, my presentation is a very modest effort at sharing thoughts about how we can do the second best thing for the here, the now, our children, our grandchildren, our nephews, our nieces in today's society. All right. That's really the context of this.
So, I mean, I'm looking at the six survival secrets. So, I mean, you have it kind of laid out there. I mean, number one, it says
Yeah.
know your responsibility. Number two, be clear on goals and priorities. Number three, prevention is better than cure. Number four, environmental influences. Number five, the effect of ideas. And number six, efforts versus results.
Can you just confirm that you can see
Yeah.
my slides now?
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah, I
can?
can see. Yes.
These are the 6 points that I'm going to do like a whistle stop tour today. Okay. So I call them 6 survival secrets. This is 6 things that I think are very basic. They aren't comprehensive. Actually, some of these need to be broken down into not even just one lecture, but a series of workshops or something on their own. Okay.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Um, but we can go through these things, inshallah, bit by bit.
So, Sheikh, and when you say know your responsibilities, this means know your Islam.
Yeah. Ah, well, that's a good question. It's know your Islam, know your responsibility as a parent. Okay, so you started with the ayah from the Noble Quran. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا, believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressing us as believers and saying to us in a command قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا, save yourselves, O believers, and your families from a fire. وقودها الناس والحجارة, and that fire has fuel, and that fuel isn't coal or wood or oil or gas. That fire, the fuel, is people and stones. And this noble ayah of Quran is something that should make us as parents shaken, and as a community, as an ummah, shaken, because we are obliged to try our best to save ourselves and our families. But you know, responsibility doesn't end there, Sheikh. It doesn't start there. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said in one hadith, uh, narrated in Muslim and Bukhari, ألا كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Every one of you is a guardian, a shepherd, and responsible for his flock. And then he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, identified different people, didn't he? He said the leader of the people, the imam,
Mm.
على الناس راع وهو مسؤول عن رعيته. That the Khalifa, the Imam of the Muslims, is a guardian, and the man is the guardian of his family, and he's going to be responsible. And when he says responsible, he says mas'ul. You'll be asked about them, you're going to be accounted. And the woman is a guardian of her husband's home and his children, and she's going to be asked about them. So, this matter of family, of children, is something Allah is going to ask us about. And you can never start thinking about this stuff too young. Look at this this incident in the time of Khalifa Umar ibn Khattab, who was once approached by a man who complained of his son's disobedience. And Omar called the son to him and asked him about the father's complaint and the fact that he was neglecting duty to his father. And the boy said to Sayyidina Umar, radiallahu an, does the child not have rights over the father? Umar agreed with him. He said, so what are they? So one of them, the first one, is that he should choose a mother with care, preferring the righteous woman. Another, that he should give his child a good name. And the third, he should teach him the Quran. And the boy says to the Khalifa, my father did none of these. So look at this narration. The responsibility starts even before you've married and have children, that you should be thinking about who is going to be a good, righteous mother for my children. And then when the child is born, giving a good name. And then when the child is older, teaching them something of Quran and Islam. And these are things, just a few things that should make us realize the raising children is an amana. And did you know that your children have rights over you? And did you know that you should be thinking about the time that you need to give them? And actually, I put this last thing in as just a point. One of the one of the you can say criteria of nifaq is when a person is he's supposed to, he says he's going to do something and he doesn't do it. Yeah, the man who he is supposed to do something, he promises he's going to do something and then he doesn't do it. Yeah, and how many fathers, how many parents will promise their children things and then actually not deliver? And actually, these things sometimes we take for granted, but actually, some of these personal characteristics of a person, they do show in how you relate with your children, and you can't just assume that you can let go your Islamic duties just because they're your children.
Raising kids in amana.
Okay.
Sheikh,
Yeah,
question.
it's an amana.
It's interesting that meaning, because we were talking about it's a policy from the state itself. There would be policies that would tell us how to deal with the children or the families and what they want from the young men or the young women of the society, what they need to achieve and things like this. It's even surprising that somebody would come and the Khalifa would have to give them time. I mean, it's look at the discussion. Like, man is coming and saying that I have an issue with my son, and this is the Khalifa of the Muslims, probably has 1,000 other responsibilities.
Yes.
So that shows the.
So I mean, yeah. So I mean, obviously the society there was much smaller, and the Khalifa was much more accessible. But what it does show you is that the borders in Islam between the personal and the political, the communal, and they're not easy to define, and policies can matter, and so the duty of the Khalifa and the Khilafah generally is actually to create that environment. If you have fish and they are swimming in polluted waters, they won't be healthy fish, right? And if they have swimming in clean water with good fresh sunlight and oxygen and plants and these things, the fish will be healthy fish. The Khalifa's job is to create that Islamic environment which is there for us to thrive as families. Okay, and there is a job. Education is a role of government everywhere in the world. So when it comes to education, that specifically is unquestionably that's a state, that's a governmental policy. Okay, so you have to have that. But raising children is more than just education, as we will come on to discuss. And I think there's a lot for us to think about outside of that environment as well, because I don't know about you where you are, but an awful lot of Muslim parents assume that the tarbiyah of their children can be outsourced to the madrasa or to the masjid or to the mainstream school. Yeah, they think, especially where they grew up in their countries, discipline was taught in school. You stand up when the teacher comes in. You told the teacher miss or sir or madam or these things. Forget that. These schools here are like a jungle. Yeah, teachers come out every day stressed out, hearing abuse. These kind of things. There are no rules. Okay, so a lot of parents send their kids to the school thinking, they're going to learn really nice, good things.
But Sheikh, let me ask you
That's
this:
just not going to happen.
So when you say that, why is it that maybe not anymore, but at the same time, that the schools in the West, I mean, people are sending their children from across the world to the West. I mean, you've obviously studied in the West. You're a doctor practicing in the West. Why is it still such an attraction for educating the children in the West rather than the East?
Number one, they have a system, all right?
Okay.
Whereas
whether it's good or
we
bad,
don't
there's
have
a system.
Whether it's good or bad, they have a system. Yeah. So actually, it's not that unusual to meet people, particularly from the Arab world, who might have been educated in the Soviet Union. Yeah, they had a system, right? So you could
I
go,
see.
from Arab countries and stuff and study it in the Soviet Union. They had a system. You can follow it there. Yeah. So this is one thing. The other thing is, but it's there's an ignorance in assuming education is value neutral. All right. You don't think it has values? No. Education curriculums are very, very, very underpinned by philosophy. And even within Western education curriculum, there are different philosophical thoughts about approaching how you educate children. All right. There are left-wing views and right-wing views on education, right? But ultimately they are secular education models which we are exposed to everywhere across the world. And people assume, oh, education's education. You're going to learn maths, you're going to learn science, you're going to learn to read and write, you're going to learn history, you're going to learn geography. Actually, these are, perhaps with the single exception of mathematics, right? Mathematics might be the only subject which is, as far as I know, is not like laden with values. Science definitely is. Literature definitely is, right? It's not just that they teach your children to read and write in English medium schools. The material they're teaching from is very, very loaded with ideological baggage. History, your family originally from India, right?
Yes.
The school I went to was the school that Clive of India went to. Okay. And he's taught there at that school. This guy's taught as a hero. All right. And Mir Jafar is taught as a hero who helped him. And Siraj ad-Dawla is taught as the villain. So, you got Muslim kids going to schools like that. What are they going to learn about? Everything's topsy-turvy because it is history.
That's even if they know that history of Mir Jafar or Siraj ad-Dawla.
That's right.
Or
So
even Tipu Sultan.
It's actually by chance.
Yeah.
That's right. It's by chance one day I came home and I had said to my mother, this is what we're learning in school. And she's like, oh, Mir Jafar, he's a traitor, right?
Yes.
That's what you guys in America call, I think, Benedict Arnold. Is that the guy, the famous US traitor? That's the synonym in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh for a traitor is Mir Jafar, right? So and by the way, it's so twisted that Clive was thrown out of this school that I was at. He was actually considered such a bad student and such a disruptive influence. They threw him out before he finished his schooling. But when he became famous afterwards, they celebrated that this guy used to go to our school. All right, it's so twisted like that.
I mean, even for instance, you have what's his name? The Arabian guy, they call him Lawrence of Arabia, for instance. I was reading this small
Lawrence of
booklet.
Arabia,
It's about,
absolutely.
I don't know, 50, 60 pages long, but they were talking about his heroic acts. It's a whole book just about his, and so when you read it, you're like, oh man, this guy is brave. This guy is courage. This guy is something else, man. He went to the Arab tribe and he was going around the Muslim world doing what he was doing. And then he ends up in this military, that military. So of course, Yani, depending on where you're studying, curriculums, or these things matter. But I mean, going back to educating, Sheikh, now, but is it we are in a mess because of secularism?
Okay. Can I answer that question through just my next part of my presentation, my second point? So my first point, if you like, was about my first point was about knowing our amana, and my second point is about being clear on your goals and thinking about what's an acceptable outcome for you and your children. For your children.
So, no, I'm because you said something. You said, look, know your.
So look at my question here, Sheikh. If I ask an average parent, what do you want for your kids, right? They can give me lots of answers. I want my kids to be healthy. I want them to learn something of Quran. I want them to succeed in life. I want them to get good education, good job. All right. So I divided my answer to this question when I asked parents in the workshop, what do they want, into these three brackets, okay? That they want to have happy and confident and healthy children. They want them to have a secure Islamic identity, and they want them to fulfill their academic potential and other life potential, okay? Now, let me ask you this question. If, let's say, your children were happy and they were hugely successful in a worldly perspective. They went to Harvard and they became very successful businessmen or professional, whatever. Okay, but they lost their Islamic identity. For how many Muslim parents would that be a success? Right, that would be a massive fail if they were worldly successful but failed in their Islamic identity. Or if I said to you that they were worldly successful, but they were unhappy, miserable, confused, underconfident, unhealthy, that would also be failure. So, actually, as parents, we should be very clear in our heads. Yeah, fine, I want my children to do the best they can in life. But surely that is number three after having healthy, confident, happy children and children whose deen is secure, right? That these two has to come first. So when we think of education and tarbiyah and all these things together, if you're not clear on this in your head, I'm telling you something, the number of parents I've seen who push their children in number three and they prioritize this over other things, they either have miserable children or they have very secular children in years gone by, and they regret that. So I ask you, and I ask people listening, ask yourself, what have you prioritized? What does Islam prioritize? What do you give time to? And do you have to rethink things? And are you leaving things too late? Because there comes a point at which, if you try and go back to your children to address some things, when the older they get, the harder it is for you to do.
But let me ask you, Sheikh, what kind of parents are you talking to when you present this?
A whole mix. So some of them are quite motivated Islamic parents and Islamic families, but even then, they have a high status on the what you can say. Secular education is one word, or you can say temporal education. Yeah, they have a high status on these worldly education thing, and even some of them you can see pushing their children in that direction.
See, look,
And some of them, some of the parents I talk to are what I would call nice Muslim families, which haven't really thought a lot deeply about Islam beyond, I want my kids to be good people. I want them to have good manners. They should respect their parents. They should respect Allah and this messenger. They should learn something of Quran. But then they find, as their kids get into the schooling system, the kids are coming back with questions they cannot answer. And they have not laid the groundwork for answering those questions. Okay? So questions, whether they be, does Allah exist? How can I know Allah exists? Questions about, well, nowadays, sexual identity, my teacher says you can have two dads or two moms, right? How do you answer that? My teacher says I don't have to be a boy or a girl. I can choose. Yeah. My teacher says we all came from apes. All right. Now, answering those questions requires, it's actually not very difficult, to be honest with you, to answer such questions.
Hold on, Dr. Abdul Wahid. See, here's the thing. So we have parents that want their children to go to madaris, and we have madaris, and madaris are very expensive. Find parents who can afford it. They're sending their children to madaris, and they want them to, become scholars, do hifz of Quran, and But even after they become scholars, Sheikh, even they become scholars, they might go to these schools for 3 years, 4 years. So there's two things here. One, okay, you become a scholar, what will you do? Okay, fine. Then, you have to look for a job, and then that's one thing, and then they become imams of the masjid, or they might become, start some institute and things like that. Or the other thing is that,
How many people can do that?
oh,
How
less than
many people? How
5%,
many
10%. I mean, in the
Yeah,
US,
less than what? Less than 1%, surely.
but I mean, in
Less
the
than
US, there
1%
is a
was.
huge, in the US, there's a huge push for that. Let's say, okay, I mean, Chicago, for instance, right around here, we have Sharia board, we have Darul Salam, we have many institutions that are trying to do with Darul Qasim. We have, I mean, even we are trying to open up a program, inshallah, called Islamic OASIS Academy, and then to do a whole thing. But my question, Sheikh, is that even those who went to scholarly schools, we don't see. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is that the average parent, I guess they want their children to be successful in financially, right? I mean, so they can live their lives in the West. At least that's what they came here for. So their goal, everything is, look, man, we came here to this country. You need to do 1, 2, 3. You need to just make sure that you give your family comfortable life, this and that. And then there is that part. Okay, fine. There is even those Islamic schools and whatever, but they're also producing the same type of secular-minded scholars. And in reality, I don't even know if they realize that what they're actually accepting is that the secular manners are the best manners to practice, because at the end of the day, even they themselves are compromising and saying that, look, we need to be secular, we need to be able to do this, talk about democracy and ask for democracy, even for the Muslim world and things like that. So I guess what when you say this is a guide, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Who should we be talking to, Sheikh? Because there's so much confusion.
Okay, so my this talk that I'm presenting is to just general parents, but actually, you can really divide the families into 3 groups, I would say. One is the one with the very much younger children, the preschool age children. Okay, they're the ones you have the best hope for, because if they can be clearer in their head about what the goals are, and not trying to get their kids to get a basic education, fine, a worldly education, fine, but not falling into the trap that this is the ultimate goal is Harvard. That's the that's the Yale, Harvard, these kind of things are the ultimate goal. Oxford, Cambridge, this is the ultimate goal. This is nonsense, right? This is very dangerous when you have this kind of mentality, right? Because I will tell you about people who have that mentality, and their children will be hugely successful in
The dunya.
material terms, in worldly terms, they'll be hugely successful. They will have lost their akhirah, right? They will lose their akhirah, and beware of what you push your children for. And now there's plenty of parents that say, no, I don't want my children to lose my akhirah, but I don't want to push on the Islamic side. They can be worldly, but they can have nice manners and stuff like this. Well, there's another problem here. What you're not realizing is foundations. All of us, when we do something in life, it's built on solid foundations. Okay, you build your foundations on kufr, and you don't know what the outcome. You may think you want a nice Muslim doctor, engineer, teacher, whatever, right? But actually, you build your foundations on kufr. Even if you push them to become an Islamic scholar, they're going to be very deviant.
See, this is what I'm saying, Sheikh. We talk to parents.
You build your
parents
foundations on Islam, and now, what does that mean? That will mean different things to different people when you say build your foundations.
Sheikh, the parents themselves don't know Islam. That's what I'm trying to tell. From what I'm facing, the parents don't know. Even when you use the word, well, do you want your children to grow up on kufr? They have no idea. You mean, do you want your children to accept the values of democracy and capitalism? Or for
Yeah.
them, democracy and capitalism is Islam, and
So
they'll argue
so
for it.
so
That's what I'm saying. Is that
no. Here's where so there's a few parents, and you will know there are some parents I know who are starting to think about this thing preschool. Okay,
Mm,
most don't, but a
yeah,
few do.
yeah.
Now, then you have the next group of
If they've
parents.
been hit in life,
Then
if
you have
they've
the next
seen,
group of parents
sure.
whose children go into school,
Mm,
and the parents are starting to get worried because they're seeing behaviors they didn't
mm.
want,
That's what
or
I'm
they're
saying. Unless
hearing
they
they're
had
hearing
some.
ideas that
Mm,
they were not expecting,
mm,
right?
yes. Now it's a
And
hit.
they're getting shocked.
Yes.
Okay, now this is your second group of parents, all right, who are now waking up to reality, who are now
Mm,
waking up to how difficult this is, and realizing something else, Sheikh. So realizing they have deficiencies themselves which they cannot address their children's
yes.
problems.
Yes. Now, yes.
Okay, so this is the second group of parents, very sincere, right? The reason they ended up in this situation was not a deliberate problem, it was ignorance of the jungle they were in. Why I call it a survival guide, they didn't realize they were in a jungle, they thought they were in Central Park. Okay,
See, that's
all
an
right,
interesting thing.
yeah,
Now, even the naming, which is survival guide, which means you're trying to
yeah.
you're in a place where you're trying to survive in a society that is supposedly very advanced society, right?
and
Uh,
and and one of
if
the
and
reasons
you but you're
I
understanding
had
what advancement is, and you're trying to you're saying no, this is not advancement. You need to figure out how to survive in this jungle.
it's technologically advanced. It's
Understood?
technologically advanced, and they are politically mature in the sense that they have political institutions which we
Sure,
don't have in our countries,
sure.
right? But their political institutions and their education programs and the values that permeate society are not Islamic ones. And a lot of parents didn't realize that. My parents, may Allah bless them and reward them,
Amen.
they always worried about their children becoming westernized, but they
Mm,
didn't know what westernized meant. They really didn't realize that, okay? And they didn't have a clue what was going on in the schools they were sending us into. And I would, on the one or two occasions when I gave them a glimpse of the kind of things that were going on in the school, they were so agitated emotionally, and they said, "Oh, I want to speak to the headmaster if this is going on." That I never wanted to tell them anything after that, because it would have just been too embarrassing if my every time I told them something that's going on in the school, the parents are going to go to the headmaster. I'm going to be like a weird kid in that school. Yeah.
so Sheikh, here's the
So
thing.
so I
Are
don't.
you
So
your
so
parents your parents
our
were the school, or because as they say, the mother is the school by herself.
no, my parents gave, they gave what they could give to their children, all
That's
right,
the
in
yeah.
terms of general Islamic lessons and these kind of things. But then once your kids go to mainstream school, there's pressures on them, all right.
But Sheikh,
Your
the
kid
parents
comes
that
home with
we did have,
homework.
but those parents, were they better than what the parents that we see today?
Those parents were different. I think they didn't. Okay, they were better in one sense, or they were different in one sense, that they never imagined. My parents never imagined they were going to be living here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah, they came here thinking it was a temporary thing. My
Mm,
father, when he came here thinking it was a temporary thing. You don't realize that by the time your kids are 10, 12 years old, it's too late to migrate back to another country. They're alienated from that other society. Okay, so um, in that sense, the parents, there was this concept that we are different. We're just here temporarily. The current generation, they think they're here to stay, so they are thinking more about how to fit in, which is
mm,
more dangerous,
mm.
actually. Yeah, my parents were never thinking about how to fit in, because they were thinking we're just here temporarily, and they would give you that message that, maybe not explicitly, but subliminally, this is them, this is us. So
Yes.
there was that.
Yes.
But this generation is much more like, no, you know, we are,
We are them.
American Muslims, or we are
Yeah,
British
we are
Muslims.
them.
So
We are, yes.
and we are them,
We are them.
and without thinking what that even means. Yeah,
Yes.
without thinking what that even means sometimes. Yeah.
So,
Uh,
Sheikh, is that
so
that mentality that, us and them, we don't act like them. They're, they're kuffar, they're like this. That actually helped us keep that identity. That's
yeah, it
them.
did,
That's them.
and
We're not like
and
them. We're not like them. Those are juhala. They're jahil people. They're, they act like that. But but now, Sheikh, I mean, is that also when you're writing this survival guide? Is that also something that you're
yeah.
thinking that, look, this is what happens when you move to the West? We have to
Yeah,
write these
definitely.
survival
But it's
guides.
what I've real definitely it happens when you move to the West. But what I've realized in interacting with people who live in other countries is many of the same things they're
Mm,
facing. You can say the only thing they may be catching up on at the moment is the sexual identity stuff. It's much
mm,
harder to talk about that. But I was talking, for example, I was talking to a family member who lives in the UK who moved back to Pakistan for a few years, and they were trying to give their tarbiyah to their children really nicely, beautiful children, mashallah. And the parents, they said they when they went to Pakistan, um, they enrolled their kids in a very good school for young kids, 5 6 years old, and they said to the daughter, now when you see the teacher and the principal, you say salamu alaikum. So they got to the school door. The principal is a sister wearing a headscarf. And the little girl says, Salamu alaikum to the head teacher. And the head teacher says, Good morning. Okay. All right. Now, that is a very confusing thing for a 5 year old, right? Who's moved from the UK to Pakistan and is meeting with that. She doesn't understand this, what I'm about to say to you now, but she's basically meeting a Muslimah, educated teacher who is affected by colonialism, who thinks that I have to do a good education system. I have to do like the British do or the Americans do. I have to teach like that. Okay. And so this is like now this exists here as well, because if you can go to an area where the children are 95% Muslim, right, but they won't say salam to each other in the school because they know somewhere along the line they've been given a signal, we don't talk like that in school, right?
mm.
They might turn up on the first day and say salamu alaikum to somebody they know who might be their cousin who lives a few roads away, right? And maybe a teacher hears them and doesn't say any, don't mean to be malicious even, but they just say, oh, what did you say? Because they heard salam, they don't know what it is. They say, what do you say? Oh, uh, they
Mm,
very quickly learn, we say hi and bye,
mm-hmm.
okay? We say hi and bye in the school. And actually that continues, right? That continues. You will meet people who are grown up in Muslim countries who will be more comfortable with hi and bye than
Yes,
they
yes.
were with giving salam. All
Actually,
right.
I was giving a
Uh,
khutbah last Jummah in one of the masajid, and I saw some young, it was young brother. He came from Saudi, and he came into the masjid. I was about to give the khutbah maybe about 5 minutes before. So when I saw him, I told him, "Akhi, you can't wear shorts like that and pray. Those shorts, your salah will not be accepted. The whole aura is showing. I mean, what are you doing?" So, and then he went back to he said, "Oh, okay." So he went back to his car, then he put on the proper, and then he came into the masjid. And I think he was shocked that somebody would actually say something like that in the West, in the masjid, and
yeah.
I'm wearing a thobe and I'm giving a khutbah, and then he realized, oh, he's the khatib and things like that. And I was shocked. For me, it was a shock that a kid born and raised in Saudi would not know the proper etiquettes of Salatul Jummah or even how you should dress when you pray.
I mean, in my intro, I skipped through this bit, but part of my background in talking about this is personal, raising my own kids, seeing other young people in my family, much younger than me, growing up and helping to be like a guardian figure in their lives. Part of it is professional. My job is a doctor. I get
Mm,
asked by parents of all backgrounds, Muslim,
mm,
non Muslim, about parenting issues and difficult issues. Um, uh, and part of it is political. And as an Islamic activist, I watch policy on these things. I see how it's playing out. Some governments in the West, in Britain and France, for example, probably US as well, have made children's schooling a battlefield, an ideological battleground for Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the professional life, I have come across young people in their teens who have grown up in the holy cities in Saudi, not just in
Yes,
Saudi,
Makkah,
but the
Medina.
holy
Yeah.
cities in Saudi, right?
True.
And they have, within 4 or 5 years of living here,
Oh yeah.
they have completely got lost. Why? Why? Because what they had in that environment and the traditions that they had been brought up with were not linked to some solid ideas. All
Yes.
right. And so very as soon as they got here, they are like a boat with an anchor, and the water current can just wash it in any direction. Or they are like a building without foundations, and the wind can blow it down very quickly. All right. So that's why so that's what you really hearing these things for parents is very important, because it's never too early to start.
Yes.
Um, so the first phase is preschool, then the school age kids who the parents are starting to get questions which they weren't expecting about Allah, evolution, about men, women, identity, gender identity, relationships, sex education, science, history. They don't know where to start. The parents are honestly like, I wasn't expecting this. I was just sending my kids to school thinking they're going to learn maths, English. I didn't expect them to come home and ask me questions that I can't answer. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third group of the group where the kids are kind of more in high school, what we call secondary school here, and they're starting to see behaviors they don't like,
Mm.
right? Disrespect, hanging out with a bad crowd, dressing in a certain way, hanging out with the opposite sex, um,
Sheikh, let me ask you,
social
dealing,
media issues.
I grew up here. I
Yeah,
mean, at least, well, I guess I grew up here, yeah. But Sheikh, there are things that you have to deal with, even in these institutions, right? When you're growing up here, there's all kinds of cultural issues you have to deal with. You can't be, sometimes you have to learn how to be rude, and you have to be sometimes even gangster like in many ways, right? I mean, if you're going to survive in these environments, in these schools, I mean,
yes,
especially
yes,
if you're new in the country, you come into the classrooms. I remember what I went through, being, can't speak English well. That was maybe fourth, fifth grade, whatever it was. And, kids making fun of you, the way you look, the way you dress, how, immigrants, new immigrants, how they're, and the way you smell, the way. So you come in here and your parents are telling you, okay, you have to respect, you have to speak like this, you have to do that and that. And then within the first week, you realize if I don't
yeah.
stand
If I
up,
don't
if I don't
tough
have a
up,
backbone,
if I don't,
I'm going to be dead.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
Sheikh,
If you
how do
don't
you
toughen up,
so because and that what's happening, at least what I'm seeing is that kids have two identities: an identity at
yeah,
home, right? I have to pray. They come in, they'll pray, they'll do all of that, and then the moment they're on the street, they're a totally different person, and then
yeah.
they're totally
Parallel
different.
lives.
They have two, three
It's a
different types of lives, right?
parallel life. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, so how do we deal with that, Sheikh? Again, that's probably something,
Yeah.
a question on the minds of many, many, many Muslims who are trying to figure, and then also in the minds of the youth and those who are growing up, whatever, in universities, or
So
saying, man, what
I
do I
think
do
you
here?
have to realize once the kids get to that age where when they're not kids, actually they are
Young adults, yeah.
young adults, they're adults, and you have to have a different approach. And I say to many parents that I meet who are having issues with their teenage kids, you treat your kids like kids, they'll behave like kids. You treat them like
True,
young adults, they'll behave like adults. Yeah.
true, true.
You remind them that they're baligh or baligha. Yeah. Actually, this ayah that we mentioned, "Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara," this puts a big responsibility on you and me when the kids are not mature. All right. but once the kids are mature, actually you need to not remind them, you need to tell them and then remind them it's between you and Allah now. All
Yes.
right. Now,
So that so
what I
that
was
means
telling you,
before they become
last month. Yeah, that's it.
before they become
Go
mature,
on,
you're already
finish.
building them into manhood or womanhood. I mean, you're already telling them, look, man, you have
Exactly.
till this time.
Exactly.
After that, I'm not responsible over you in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. You are.
Exactly.
So you're talking
Exactly.
from the ages of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever that now, 10, 11 becomes an issue here. But Sheikh, so how fast are we supposed to work to develop our kids? I mean, that's a.
Well, this is a good question, and let's just go back to my let me just go back to my slides quickly, if that's all right,
Yeah, of course.
and see if I can there's one very interesting thing that I came across before, but this is, so we talked about what would be a failure or a success. I find this lesson from Quran, Sheikh, very important. أم كنتم شهداء إذ حضر يعقوب الموت إذ قال لبنيه ما تعبدون من بعدي قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about this incident in Surah Al-Baqarah. Were you witnesses when death approached Yaqub alayhi salam, a noble prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So Yaqub alayhi salam says to his sons, what are you going to worship after I've gone? Okay, so imagine this. This is a Nabi of Allah, and he's asking his sons, what are they going to worship when he's gone? Now, this is not you or me, Abdul Wahid or Muhammad Shirazi. This is Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub ibn Ishaq ibn Ibrahim alayhi salam. And he's asking his kids, what are you going to worship after me? And they said, we'll worship your God and the God of your fathers, Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, one God, and we are Muslims submitting to him. Now, this makes you realize that actually Yaqub alayhi salam was building his children to be independently worshipping Allah once he's gone, right? And that's the mentality we should be having. This is the bare minimum mentality that we should be having, is that, when I'm not there to get after my kids on stuff, when I'm gone, when I'm in the grave, that they're self-motivated enough to be Muslims so that they die on Islam, at least. Yeah? That's the bare minimum I should want for my children, right? The bare minimum. But that requires thinking before they reach that age of being aqil, being mukallaf, being responsible, having an intellect and being responsible themselves. It requires you to think about that before. If you don't think about it before, you're stuck. And this is why I say prevention is better than cure. You don't want to get to the stage kids are 11 and 12 and rebelling against the fundamentals of your deen. You don't want to get to the stage where your kids are 7 or 8 and coming home and asking you questions that you can't answer. It is much better that you thought about these things young and build certain ideas, or if you started realizing in primary school, that you play catch up in early school years and you build certain ideas, or if you realize in secondary that there is in the high school that there's an issue, that you start developing some kind of networks and some workshops and something, some atmospheres, some clubs, something that is a better guide to your children. Okay. Sayyidina Ali once famously, this is a famous thing that is attributed to him. He said, play with your children for 7 years, then teach them for the next 7 years, then advise them for 7 years. All right. Like give them nasiha, be their companion for 7 years. Okay. Now, this is a very important idea that Sayyidina Ali is building in the young people, right? And I would say the 777 doesn't really work in terms of today. Nowadays, by 7, kids know all kinds. By 14, they're out of your hands. Yeah, but the concept is there. Whether it's 444 or 555. Yeah, the idea is there. There's an early years where Sayyidina Ali said, play with them. Play with them means they learn their tarbiyah from living, from fun, from family. Yeah, it's not like that you have to. It's not from discipline. It's not from. It's not from a curriculum at that stage in the early years. You have young kids. I have young kids. When did they start copying you doing namaz, doing salah?
Yeah.
You didn't have to teach them salah. You didn't have to start teaching them that. They just used to see you doing salah and they copy. Yeah, and then they jump on your back when you're doing your sujood. Yeah, and I remember, this is a bad habit, but I remember one of my kids walking, like just picking up like anything that he could find, like any like a mat or something, and holding it like this and walking around the room like pretending he's talking, and he's mimicking his father. Yeah. Okay, talking on the phone. Okay, so kids copy, and kids need love, and kids need to feel secure and protected, and kids need all those things in the early years. That it's and the discipline start is discipline doesn't really kick in until a later time. Play with them for 7, teach them for 7. So for 7 years, in the middle years, you can say, you have time where you have to teach them some formal structured stuff. I don't say 777 like that, but in the middle years, they have to have some formal structure, and that's where discipline comes in. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, when your children reach 7, what do? You teach them to pray. When do you discipline them?
Yeah, 10.
What did he say? Discipline. 10, absolutely. So 10 is the age when you discipline them. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even on the issue of salah, which is like the pinnacle of our personal ibadah, if you can say, he said, teach them from 7, and discipline is 3 years later. So he's giving 3 years for you to get to that stage where and even by the end of that 3 years, they will know that if you are not praying when you're 10, I am obliged to discipline you, according to what my Nabi said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so you're preempting things all the time. So there are great lessons for us in these things. Yeah, that actually, so some of the formal teaching of things is actually the middle years, and then the 7, which is advise them, give them companionship. Once your kids get into their teen years, you have to modify your relationship with them so that you're talking down to them. You're not talking to kids, you're talking to young adults. You're giving them nasiha like you would give a nephew or a young brother nasiha or a young sister nasiha. Yeah, you're dealing with them with a bit more respect, and with all due respect to the mothers out there who are watching, they find this adjustment much harder, because it's the nature of a mother who is so protective and so does so much of the early years tarbiyah, that to adjust that in the teenage years to be a little bit more like an advisor is not easy. Yeah,
No.
they're still the kids. Yeah,
Yeah. I think most of the
but it's the nature. It's the nature. It's the nature of the mother. But I don't say this as a criticism. Rather, I say this as actually often what I've seen is that the fathers will realize this a bit earlier, that I
Yes.
can't carry on that same disciplinary approach that I used to use. Yeah,
I mean, it's
and the
actually easier
mothers.
for mothers. I think even it's the children are actually still accepted from the mother, especially even if she's tough, the children will
Yeah,
accept it just
yeah.
because it's the
Maybe
mother and the
maybe
mother. Yeah,
if you have sons, the mother needs to be quite tough.
yes. So she have so they have that and they know that this is my mother. I gotta So Alhamdulillah, if you've done
Yeah,
that work, they know mother. That's just the way it is. She can. You just look down and But that's also again that's training. Also, I mean, that look if the mother the respect of mother and what level it reaches it's I mean that's also part of teaching
yeah.
and then
We had some refugee kids who are registered with where I work as a patients, and one of the young guys, the boy, he's like 15. He's getting in trouble at school, and he's being thrown out of school. And he came with his mother. She doesn't speak any English, and
she probably let him
I
know who's
said,
the mother.
I said to, I said to her through an interpreter, I said, the school want me to send your kid to some psychologist. What do you think? She said, he's a young man. Yeah, this is how young men are.
Mm.
He'll come into line. I don't think he needs a psychologist. I said, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think this is not a medical issue, which the school want to make it some psychological issue. There are issues he has to deal with in terms of conduct in school, and he's sticking. And it's actually very much like you said. He's sticking up for himself where things are tough, and then he's
That's the
getting in
thing,
trouble.
Sheikh. Here's the thing, the
Yeah,
final question, Sheikh.
and I have to say, his mother was spot on. There was not an issue with him medically, uh, and she was realizing that he's a young man, and that she has to, you know, there's a limit that she's not going to baby him. She's
Mm.
hearing from him the things he's dealing with are not simple things. They're tough things he's dealing with. Yeah, it's not a question of saying don't go to school, don't answer back, don't do this, don't do that, because she doesn't. His the jungle, right? He's in the jungle. If the teacher is the monster, if the teacher is the animal, or the other kids in the class are the problem, teaching him to be, like a certain way is not just it's not the right answer, right? You have to be able to listen, you have to be able to hear, you have to be able to support, you have to be able to advise. Yes, sometimes you might still discipline even though they're baligh or baligha, but the key thing here is you've got to have more than one tool in your toolbox to deal
Mm.
with this. Yeah.
Sheikh, a few things.
um,
Last few questions here. Number one, the teenagers in general are going through a lot of, I guess, many psychological. For instance, this whole idea of ADHD. What do they call the ADHD? I think or HD, whatever it is.
ADHD.
ADHD.
Yeah.
And then is the West, Sheikh, the education system in the West, or in general, how the youth are growing up in this society? The culturing that we have, is it so? Islam gives us the culturing process, right? I mean, teach prayer, teaching respect, teaching the deen, teaching this, teaching tawheed, teaching how do we believe in Allah Azza wa Jal, the day of judgment, accountability, responsibility, make wudu, purity, you have to be tahir. All of these things are being taught from the ages of 5 6 all the way up to even the way you go to the bathroom, the way you wear your clothes, hijab, covering aura, all of this. Now, if you look at the non-Muslims, kuffar in general, and their children, they don't have any of this culturing process. So are they naming, because they don't have a proper culturing process, when the kids come out to be the way they are, they're just naming them as diseases or some type of psychological. Is this what's happening? I guess I'm trying to figure out that when you don't have a way of properly culturing your youth, then you just kind of name everything into some type of a disease. Oh, he has ADHD. Oh, he has such and such. Oh, he has.
So
You see where I'm
there's
going with this?
there's elements. Yeah, I do. So there's elements of truth in that. I mean, there is. I mean, as a medic, there is something called ADHD. All right, but at the same time, I would say two things. One is not everything that is hyperactive or conduct issues is ADHD. A lot of it is environmental. Okay, and the other thing is a lot of modern life. If you have a propensity for these things, a lot of modern life makes it worse, whether that's in terms of diet or technology that overstimulates the mind. It makes it worse. So in one set, if I put aside genuine illness of whether it's ADHD or anxiety or depression, or which can be genuine illness, your point is valid, which is the societies we live in, they 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 have bred a generation of young people who are hyperactive, self-harming. Self-harming is very common.
Mm,
Depressed, anxious, either lacking in confidence or projecting overconfidence because they lack in confidence, and
mm,
destructive behaviors of being overconfident. Yeah. So the society we live in is toxic. It's toxic for young people, and this is not just for toxic for young Muslims. It's toxic for everyone. It's
mm.
not just for young
Yes,
Muslims.
yes, yes.
And I say to parents when they're looking at these issues, um, look at the okay. There's a route through the jungle, which might be ideally. We wish it would be a straight line where A is, where they are now, and B is where you want them to get.
Mm,
But in truth, an awful lot of young people go round in a very complicated route and then actually in the end reach B.
mm,
Yeah, they reach a good destination. Sometimes what's in the middle here, Allah forbid, is prison. Sometimes what's in the middle here is a phase of jahiliyyah. All
mm,
right,
mm,
but they do make it, and actually, uh, skipping to the very end. Why? Because the results are not in your hands and my hands, akhi. The results are in Allah's hands.
طبعا,
In the
طبعا.
end, the command Allah is saying is to try and save ourselves and our families from the hellfire, right? But in truth, we do our best to acquit our own responsibility because uh, وَرَجُلٌ رَاعٍ, a man is a guardian, وَهُوَ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَتِهِ, and he will be asked about what he's responsible over. And the woman is a guardian, all right? So we are going to be asked about our guardianship, but the results, they're in Allah's hands. So when we say, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, we are asking Allah to bless us with pious spouses and offspring who will be the joy of our hearts, the comfort of our eyes, literally, and make us examples and models, leaders for the righteous. Okay, we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for these dua because why? Because actually He is the one in control. What you learn when you're a parent is, you know, what works for one child doesn't always work for another.
Mhm,
The tarbiyah, I've seen many examples where good parents have thought these things through, and the tarbiyah for child one doesn't work for child two or child three, right?
صحيح.
So, but they're making an effort. And actually, even though it doesn't work, I see because of those efforts, in the end, the children do come back onto their path. I very quickly want to just remind parents, and I tell them this in the program, that we need to think about what influences our kids. There are some obvious things: home, school, friends. You create a good environment in these, and you have more of a chance of success. An Islamic atmosphere at home, practicing what you preach,
Mm.
trying to get a Muslim school or an Islamic school or homeschooling network, trying to socialize them in a circle of friends that is positive for them. That means developing your communities. Some of your projects like Maktab Islamic Oasis and these kind of things, you're trying to build a community atmosphere for people. But all of that sits in a society, all right? And society means a system with laws and values. Those values are projected on media and social media. Those values exist in the public opinion in the society. Okay. So actually, even if you're in Canada or New Zealand or Finland, these kind of, or Ireland, these kind of countries which are not famous for persecuting Muslims, right? There might be nice environments. Their societies have very secular, liberal values which will affect you and your kids. Never mind when you are in a country like Britain or France or the United States, where the government really has an agenda about the Muslim kids as well. Okay. So always remember, it takes a village to raise a child. And if there isn't an Islamic environment around you, in your home, in your extended wider family, in your schooling, or in your community networks, by Allah, you have to make one. You have to make the effort to make one. All right.
Mm.
And the ideas that can come in, when it comes to ideas, you've got society, social media, you've got temptations, you've got the pressure of wanting to fit in, you've got pressure of material things, Ferraris and fashion, you've got a government agenda. Actually, all that translates into ideas and thoughts, whether it's beliefs, evolution, challenging your belief in Allah and His Messenger and the Quran, the concept in religious studies that nothing is really true in this world. Everything can be questioned. The identity of men and women and relationships, politics and history, like we talked about, democracy and identity, financial issues, corrupt ideas of Islam. All these are translated in through social media, society, all things around us. So if you build certain ideas at a young age, I'll just give you one example. If I had a father mention to me that his son, came home with one of these pictures of the, what's it called, these apes where they show a series of pictures and the ape is standing up and then he's a man like this, yeah. So the father, he was saying to me, he said, my son showed me this in a book. My son, age 8. I didn't know how to answer him. Okay, I didn't know how to answer him. So let's work backwards on this. If the father now has to, imagine if the father had built certain ideas first, or the parents had built certain ideas first. When the child is young, they had taken every opportunity to stimulate the child's thought, looking at the world around, whether it's flowers, trees, sun, moon, stars, food, drink, clothing, and getting them to think, where did this come from? Who created this? Who blessed you with this food? Who gave us this beautiful sun, moon? Where did they come from? And had built this thinking that things can only come from Allah, right? By the time they're in school, that would have been so natural for the child that it would be nonsense. It would be nonsense for them to somebody to challenge that. Okay. So those ideas have to be basic. And if the parents had built the idea that this Allah, who you now believe in with conviction, created Adam and Hawa, and they are the first human beings, and that's clear, then when the parents see this book showing that man comes from an ape, na'udhu billah, when you see that, they can say very clearly to the children, yeah, they believe that, but they're wrong, aren't they? Because we know that man came from Adam and Hawa. And the kid is like, that's right. Yeah. That could be a very age appropriate response for a child who's, very young and can't understand the concept of, say, for example, when they're older, you can say, yeah, not every book is true except Quran. Okay. Lots of
Mm.
books have wrong things in. Yeah. And so us as Muslims, we have to learn how to differentiate what is right and what is wrong. You've taught your kids something about there is some things which are true and there's some things which are false, and we're going to learn over life which is which. And as the kids are older and maybe secondary or high school, you can raise issues. Well, there's something called fact and there's something called opinion. All right. There's something called a theory, which is not fact. It's just an idea people have. It might be right, it might be wrong. Okay. So some people have this theory that people come from apes. They don't have proof for it. All right.
Sheikh, last thing,
Okay.
I'm just
So just rushing through this, my point is that if you build foundational ideas first, it makes answering these things much easier. Much easier. Yeah. And if you didn't build these foundational things, you will find life much harder, not impossible, but much harder to unravel some of these issues when you face them.
I have a lot more questions, but we have another
Yeah,
program.
there
within
always will
5
be.
minutes. But
This was a
because the thing
whistle-stop
is, I wanted to ask
taster.
you. No, actually, the thing is, I wanted to bring you because Sheikh, traveling in the Muslim world, especially in war zones,
Yeah.
I meet a lot of children in camps, a lot, and when I see the disaster that they are going through, one after the other, there is no peace. There's constant trauma. There's war. There is no shelter. There's barely any resources. There's running from one place to another, and it's been, at least I've seen 10, 20 years of what I'm seeing. Just some of these things that we're talking about is almost impossible for those young guys. I mean, it's and there are thousands and millions of them, man. And I'm just thinking, of course, this is set up for the West here, for the people who have some type of safety, where you can talk about these things in a proper way, where there's time given to these things. But Sheikh, to do this in overseas, especially in Somalia's and Syria's and now in Libya's and Morocco's and Palestine, where constantly you're bombarded that West is the best. And at the same time, you're just trying to answer that mess. And then the moment you're thinking about your homes are being bombarded from the sky, man, Sheikh, the chaos is beyond belief there. So
yeah, and this is, I mean, look, in the end, security underpins everything, doesn't it? I mean, you can't be talking about these things without, and also in the end, like I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who takes care of the tarbiyah of people, and you will have seen, and I will have seen that sometimes young people who are in these places, their hardship that they face make up very quickly, right? And they grow up very quickly, and their tarbiyah is taken care of by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and himself very, very clearly, because he's tested them and they are coming through the test. And these people who are not, they will be, in one sense, they will be traumatized, but in the other sense, they have to survive and they have to help their families survive. And they are often very much stronger and better people as they grow up. And that's why actually it comes to the lesson for us in that, who are in these privileged positions in our society, is that we should want our children to be decent people who believe in Allah, trust in Allah, worship Allah, who are dutiful to their families, and who
feel for the ummah, who care for this ummah, who have the emotions for this
like
ummah.
Those kids that are brought up in those zones are because they might not have.
Look, Sheikh, I mean, even Syria,
the
when I was there,
and
most of the nasheed, when the kids learn the nasheed, because this is one of the things. Its entertainment is to memorize nasheed and Quran, and then to read
Yeah.
nasheed and get people going. Subhanallah, Sheikh, even the nasheed that people remember or youth memorize, you know, ayyuhal muslimun, and what has happened to you? Why don't you care for what was happening to us? And and then
SubhanAllah.
Muslims praying for Palestine, praying for Burma, praying for this and that. Subhanallah, Sheikh, they teach them, even in nasheed, they teach them empathy and care, and this ummah is one, that you should worry about it, that inshallah we will be the Salahuddin that will protect Masjid al-Aqsa, and the whole thing about the warriors, the mujahideen. And in the West, all of that is missing. And
Definitely.
subhanallah,
We treat our kids can be 21, 22, and we treat them like babies.
treat them like babies, and they have no responsibility of any kind.
Muhammad bin Qasim was, sent as a commander to Sindh in the Umayyad Khilafah when he's just 15, 17 years old.
And
bin Ziyad, young
and he
man.
was married, Sheikh. When his mother sent him to the area of Central Asia, his mother told him to marry, and he was 15. He got married, and then he left to Hind or Sindh.
Usama bin Zayd from the Sahaba, Asma bint Abi Bakr, Aisha radiallahu anha. These are young people who
changed the world.
Took huge responsibility on their shoulders and changed the world. Okay, and for the Sahaba amongst them, their tarbiyah was taken care of by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it teaches you that you don't take young men and young women and baby them.
Yes.
You make them feel responsible. Okay, and when I give my workshops, I want people to think to themselves, even for us in the West. Okay, I don't, the kids in Libya today, in Darna or in Morocco, in Marrakesh,
Benghazi, my God, 12 years of war.
But these kids, what they have to face is unthinkable. And we have parents here that won't even get their kids to the dishes or help prepare the food or iron the clothes. Yeah.
Irresponsible, without any sympathy, no empathy, no emotions to the
building
situation
responsibility,
of the
building caring for the ummah. These ideas should be built young, definitely, and manifest in real life in a way. That you can't. This has to be part of your tarbiyah. Otherwise, you're going to build selfish people, hypocritical people. That's
ulama,
what your kids are going to be.
Hypocritical, selfish ulama. I had anyway. That's a whole topic by itself. But we'll end it here, Sheikh. We'll end it here. But subhanallah, this is. But we have to complete this whole thing.
I hope. Just those few little discussions on a few things has just helped people listening just to think more. My approach on this is I take this general overview to start off with, and then we dig deeper into different things when we do the workshops and stuff. So maybe one day, inshallah, we'll film some of these.
Actually, what we need to do is once this building and the masjid and the center in general is ready, we are thinking October 2nd week. There's already a planning, inshallah, for doing what they're calling it like a youth. I don't know. It's something that they're doing for 2 days here already. What we need to do is do a workshop for the parents, and we have to have you on a big screen in the middle of that hall over there, and then have this back and forth discussion, bring in all the parents from different backgrounds. Let's do it that way.
And answers.
Let's bring
needs lots of questions and answers, all this, and maybe even I'll bring my own coffee and tea here,
and we'll provide coffee. We'll have everything ready for them so they can, and we'll provide the book. We need to print this book.
And what we should do, what I would humbly suggest is we break it into the
sessions.
Different age ranges, because the ones with their young children, you need one conversation with the slightly older children, another conversation with the older children, still another conversation. And so all of it is about prevention and treatment. Treatment. It's that's the approach we have to have, and inshallah ta'ala, we trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us with all of our children and keep them guided and on the right path. They are our future. They are the leaders of the future. And anything we talk about today, and I have to reiterate this, I'm afraid, that anything we talk about today is a drop in the ocean. And this should be common sense to your viewers. You cannot, there's no place in the world where the education system is not run by a government, all right? And unless we have our Islamic civilization realized by a government of Khilafah, then frankly speaking, all we're doing is sticking plasters and just doing our best to just help small groups of children, right? Part of what I want to talk about is make people aware you are in a jungle. Today's secular world, whether in the West or in the East, you are in a jungle and you need to watch out for your children, and Allah will ask you about that.
Okay, inshallah. Brothers and sisters, inshallah, with this, and that's a question Allah will ask us, and that's something that we need to keep in mind. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect and preserve us and our children and keep them, on Iman and Tawheed, and that they, generations to come until they meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are huge responsibilities. These are, I mean, we see what we are facing, and if we don't do the work today, only Allah knows what our children or if our grandchildren would be saying. And that, for that work, if you want them to say, continue saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, the hard work has to be put in today. That's just the way it works. So inshallah, brothers and sisters, we'll continue to have this conversation with Dr. Abdul Wahid, inshallah, on this booklet, mashallah, tabarakallah. And maybe we'll find a way to actually put that PDF up so people can see it. And we will set up a workshop with him also, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر لا لا